Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode and we will discuss on the Nikola Tesla technology in 21st century. You know that World Talent Economy Forum, we are uplifting our villages, our entrepreneurs and everyone. And in these particular situations, research and innovation is very much important. Nikola Tesla is one of the great inventors who invent lot of technologies and which will be very much important for the emerging economy like Bangladesh, India, Nepal, and many other countries. For these particular issues, we have our today's dialogues. We have our world famous speakers, Professor David Smith and Mr. Ifani from Africa. So first, I would like to give chance Professor David Smith. What you want to share is about Nikola Tesla, or how you want to connect the modern innovations with Nikola Tesla.
Well, Sharif, thank you for this. This is, I think, the fifth or sixth times we've focused on Nikola Tesla and the advances in his innovations in technology. And I think it's well deserved because the fate of any visionary tends to always be outside of his or her time. And such was the life of Nikola Tesla, who dreamed the future while one of his most opportunist rivals, Thomas Edison, tended to seize the moment from him during much of his life. Uh, even now, if you think about Nikola Tesla, uh, you see many people say he was a fantastic innovator, a fantastic visionary. Uh, he also had some wildly impractical ventures at his time he came up with them. They were too advanced, too expensive, and the technologies had to catch up with him. Uh, but then you can kind of look and see the other side of it, though, is that he did invent a lot of technologies that are impacting us today and will continue in the future. But his biggest challenge is he was a great inventor. He began to do things to protect his intellectual property, but he wasn't very good at commercialization. And that is where he fell apart. Even his inventions of alternating current and hydroelectric power, uh, which he competed directly against Thomas Edison with. His partner, Westinghouse, on those ended up commercializing it and reaping the majority of the benefits from it, as opposed to Nikola Tesla. Um, and we see this really going forward. Uh, but you see even places where when Nikola Tesla came to the United States, he began to, even while in Europe, he worked with Thomas Edison, but then they came here, they became bitter rivals, and particularly with the difference between uh, Edison was pushing direct current, where Nikola Tesla wanted the alternating current, and they were really opposites when you begin to look at it, and they ended up fighting in court for years, and uh, they the Thomas Edison actually had some of Nikola Tesla's patents overturned, but recently the Supreme Court here has actually re-overturned those back to be applicable to the estate of Nikola Tesla. So you see that going on right now, and even with that. And Tesla was actually even quoted back in some of his writing that said, "It seems I've always been ahead of his time." And he wrote a lot about that and put it together. And the some of his predictions are actually for the times we're in right now, and they're proving pretty true. One of his was he had envisioned way back then a wireless communications device that could fit in your pocket. Sharif, I bet almost all of your listeners have wireless communications devices that they can fit in their pockets and purses. So we see those being held true today, and how they can be used very effectively in what we're doing today. So let me just jump in real quick and just touch on what I is some of the things are the things and how you can be what happened with him. And even when he died, you begin to see it. So for his time, and this is, he began his inventions in the early 1880s when he worked at the Central Telegraph Office in Budapest. He was actually one of the most prolific uh, inventors of the time and really patented not just local but international patents as he worked on it. One of his first ever patents was for an electric arc light that was filed back in 1884 and beginning to look at how to protect it and how to begin to put it. So in the United States alone, Nikola Tesla held 112 registered uh, patents here. And he also patented in over 26 different countries and was very active in promoting those patents around the world. Uh, he is claimed to have over 275 patents, which is, quite a bit as you begin to understand it. The Tesla Foundation, though, has come back and going through his paperwork and things, have now revised that figure from about 275 to over 300. And many of those were for some of the same technologies. They were all new in different things. For for the years that he was developing very actively there. But some of his top inventions were the Tesla coil. And the Tesla coil itself, I love to watch them work because it's basically a way to store electrical energy and transmit it. Uh, and it's used to produce high voltage, low current, high frequency alternating current. Oftentimes you see these in different entertainment areas where it shoots bolts of lightning in the sky. But it actually has been used in so many different uh, areas that it's the fundamentals. We look at some of the communications technologies, particularly the early ones. Uh, and he had intended the Tesla coil to become a part of a dream he had for a wireless power system that could transmit alternating current around the world. And and he was really working on that. One of the things he did with advancing the Tesla coil was something he called a magnifying transmitter. And that worked tremendously well and actually caused neighbors to sometimes be afraid of him. But then he also looked at things like the Tesla turbine, which is a, a unique style turbine that could be used in the automotive industry and others, and in generating power. And the fuel efficiency of his engine was as high as 90%, uh, which is extremely high even today. Another place where he was a tremendous inventor was he developed the very first shadow graphs, which was a precursor to uh, he used it in attempt to attain a vacuum tube in it, but instead he saw the different screws. He also is kind of competing with this in another individual called Röntgen, who is also credited for inventing X-rays, but Nikola Tesla is credited for maybe producing the first X-ray image with it. And he also went and described at the time the clinical benefits of using X-rays. Uh, he also saw that he could use the Tesla coils to transmit and receive really pretty powerful radio signals. And he is credited for basically building up long distance uh, demonstrations of this to transmit signals across the English Channel. And it's the basis, like I said earlier, for a lot of it today. He invented the neon light. Uh, he developed a hydroelectric generation system that he and deployed at Niagara Falls and generated electricity using the power from Niagara Falls and transmitted it to New York. He's great at inventing the inductive motor, which we use everywhere today. The one that I really think is fun is that he also is the inventor of the radio control boat. So this was beginning to use some of what we have today. You know, I mentioned earlier the alternating current and others, but I could go on his invention on this. But Dr. Sharif, you can see he really did have inventions that have changed the world to where we are today. So I think that's great for my first opening remarks here, Sharif. Your other guests contribute something.
Yeah. Mr. David Smith, you know that worldwide Tesla get huge exposure through Tesla car. If you ask maximum people in South Asia, I think around 90% people know the Tesla car. And what you want to share about the Tesla car, their business process, their corporate cultures, about Elon Musk? Because most of the people, when I discuss, they said, "Oh, it's a car company."
Well, that's a real common misconception, and you know there are some semblances. Elon Musk did study Tesla in his process of in how he invented the things he invented. But you know, you see that for example, at Harvard here in the United States, they studied both the Nikola Tesla innovation process and the innovation process at Tesla Motors, and how they've gone back and forth. And you know, uh, Tesla Motors is now headquartered here in Austin, actually not far from where I live, and one of their gigafactories is there. And some of their new advanced developments are there even for SpaceX and Neuralink and others. But Nikola Tesla was very interesting in that he said he wanted to do most of the designs in his head. And then he would go and write them down and collaborate. That's actually fairly similar to Elon Musk, too, in that he liked to work through them, begin to use them, and push them onto the other people that he has working with him. Um, and you see that really working into their benefits going forward. Uh, you know, the Nikola Tesla and Tesla Motors uh, look at how they can do things to help invent the future, and they particularly wanted to do it with using the types of technologies, the uh, alternating currents, the others. But you know, it's been uh, Elon Musk has been quoted as saying that Tesla came from the name of Nikola Tesla, and that it was part of it there. But you know, you have this image of the two of them, where they're doing things, they're closing their eyes, they're looking back, they're trying to be the innovators. And the big difference between Elon Musk and Nikola Tesla is Elon Musk is pretty focused on how do I commercialize it? How can I move it forward? How can I do the different elements in it? Um, and they both had their own set of controversy. Yeah, Sharif, some of your people you have on here as panelists um, do not agree with Elon Musk and do not really agree with how he does things and like that. But but from my interactions with him, he's very progressive and somewhat misunderstood, which is the same that Nikola Tesla was in his time. Does that help you? Oh, I see we lost
Yeah,
Pamela.
definitely itself. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit.
Can you hear me, Mr.? Okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. Like when we discuss about Nikola Tesla, like major thing is innovation, research, and it's need lot of investment. My For my audience, it's very important. We are advocating modern science, engineering, and technology in emerging economy. Besides that, we are helping to innovate a lot of technologies for emerging economy. So how we can develop a good culture for emerging economy for research and innovations? How, especially USA, they support different kind of science, innovation, and startup.
Um, you know, my approach to that is you have to begin to understand what are the core competencies and capabilities of your region, of the people, of the things. You need to look at where the mass of human capital is that you can take advantage of. Now, I believe you can use human capital um, anywhere in the world today. I have development teams that we end up, in essence, working 24 hours a day on sometimes because we take advantage of development teams in Asia, in Europe, in North and South America. And so we have our times overlap where we can do things like that. Um, so, for example, a software engineer starting in Europe and the United States, we usually do our quality testing on that in Vietnam, for example, so that when the developers wake up in Europe, they have their results back in many of the instances. So you have to begin to understand it that way. Um, so understand what the competencies and capabilities are, what the human resources are. Uh, Begin to look at the needs. Are they regional needs? Are they global needs? And increasingly, we're seeing more and more global needs in some ways supersede some of the local needs. Because today, I like to say, with the exception of the personal service industry, um, once you launch a company, you put up a website that's global. So you're almost global from launch outside the personal services industry. So you need to understand the care about and what the market needs there. You also need to look at who are people you can partner with. Are you partnering with academia to help produce the human capital you need? Are you partnering with academic and other corporations for research and development? Uh, and how do you begin to do that commercialization? The big element that Nikola Tesla missed was how do you commercialize? And commercialization is hard. Yeah, commercialization is, I like to use a rope analogy. I can develop a technology, but like a rope, it's really hard to push a rope. You have to create pull to get a rope to move forward. And you have to do the same thing with technology. And so as you're trying to do the innovations and drive the research and put policies in places that can support that, all those elements are very important to consider.
Excellent. Professor, when we discuss about the commercializations, so this is very important. So Do you think because of the commercialization process, USA actually playing a major role for the modern economy? So it's mean if we have a new innovations and if you know how to commercialize your innovation and technology, it's actually help us a lot. So
Oh, it would.
how
It
you want
definitely would.
to train my community and culture? Yeah.
I mean, it definitely will. If I go back and look uh, in history, there's waves of innovation coming across different areas in the world where, when the United States was being formed, uh, a lot of the innovation came from uh, Europe, England, and as well. If I go back further in history, a lot of the innovation in uh, hundreds of years before that came from Asia. Then it came to the United States. And guess what? A lot of innovation now is moving back to Asia again. So you see these waves of innovation, and we will continue to have waves of innovation as you see things. We also see how education is a big driver to technology transfer and commercialization. Again, you can still see the waves there as well with how people have traveled around the world to get education in each of the different areas. Um, when I actually have been a lecturer in some of the master's programs in technology commercialization, you see and say, what are the differences that cause that? And most of them are cultural differences. Most of them are understanding how to use group intelligence, how to go find competencies, capabilities, and informations that they need to get it done, and that will ebb and flow with the local customs as well too. So you really need to look at the culture, look at how all parts of the technopolis work together. Once again, the technopolis is where you take education, where you take entrepreneurship with small individuals and small companies, take large companies, um, and take the government, and you put the three of them together. It takes all of those elements of the technopolis to drive successful entrepreneurship, to drive successful technology transfer, and to have the type of breakthroughs that you can have in an innovative setting. So, Sharif, I hope that answers.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Jeffrey. Was joined because of technical issues. He left. I'm sorry about that, Mr. David Smith. Uh, I want to give you special thanks how you helped uh, our emerging economy to move to the next level with your knowledge and expertise. And definitely, I want to invite you in Bangladesh, and I want to. Uh, invite our office, our projects, our government, our academy, because I'm sure you will enjoy and you can contribute a more for our country. So we have to take a lot of challenge for research and innovation because culture is very important. So what kind of culture is important to uplifting a community with our science and engineering? What do you think? What's your thoughts? What you want to our government agency or to corporations?
Well, Sharif, that is not a simple question, and one that has many different parts to it. Let me start with the answer to that with actually talking about Nikola Tesla, and then morph that along to what I think is the correct answer today. Uh, because if you look at his background, and history is messy and complicated, and we see that when you look at Nikola Tesla's background, and you know, a lot of history says he was an individual inventor, and he was, but he also studied a lot, he read a lot, and he built his inventions on the back of many others. But if I look at him, you think of science and technology as being the product of individual humans through their own genius in it. But it's really not like that. Science is a collective, and we've seen history show us that if you look at most of the Nobel Prizes in science and technology, they've been won by teams, and teams usually not at one university or one research lab, but a collaboration between them at multiple universities and labs. So clearly, innovation, particularly at the Nobel Prize level, is a team sport where that group intelligence is very important. The other thing, Sharif, that I have found in my career, and I have been parts of things that have actually changed the world as we look at the future, is that you have to have a framework for how you look at it. Uh, for my futures work and the work we've done with a lot of corporations and governments, I have a framework called Six Views of the Future, where you look at the future as an extrapolator, a pattern analyst, a goal analyst, a counterpuncher, an intuitor, or an artist. And there's different techniques under each of those. And what's important about a framework similar to that, if not that one, is it helps you uh, not only look at the different views, but it helps you reduce your error and it helps you minimize your risk. And risk is always a very hard part of innovation because, I can have incremental advances, I can have breakthrough advances, but I also can have distinctive advances, which is actually the most steep part of the innovation curve. And each of those have to happen different ways and have different drivers. And so as you balance all of it, you can see that group intelligence, collaborating with others, very important. Using a framework that balances the future and balances your risk and, and enhances your collaboration. When I do and lead something that I call a wicked problem roadmap, these are really hard problems, usually looking 20, 30, 40, 50 years in the future. The teams we pull together for each of those, I make sure all six views of the future are represented on the teams that are actually working the details in the roadmap. And that dramatically improves the quality of the roadmap. Uh, and and it's really understanding those differences, understanding the risk, understanding that, again, innovation is a team sport. Uh, One of the things that gets me often in trouble with university technology transfer offices is I will ask people, what is the best vehicle for transferring universities research to industry? And I always get a blank look and they start saying things. I said, no, no, no. The best vehicle for transferring university technology is a moving van because you're more effective when you're moving people to move technology than you are just documenting it and throwing it over the wall to others. So that's one of the things, like I said, gets me in trouble with university tech transfer offices, but it is one of the best ways to transfer technology.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. Mr. Jeffrey, what you want to discuss about advanced Nikola Tesla technology in 25 ways?
Um, I'm also
Mr.
interested
Jeffrey,
in
yeah.
yeah, I'm also interested in Tesla. I haven't learned much about the guy other than I haven't done my own personal research on him. Um, but I've seen there's a bunch of Facebook information sort of, but that's all. Can't really trust that fully. So yeah, I'd love to I know he was doing stuff with like wireless energy transfer and stuff like that, but I'm not really sure where that where that is now as far as advances with that kind of technology. So Yeah, I'd love to just kind of hear some of that. So maybe to learn some of this stuff too. So thanks.
Mr. David Smith.
Well, yeah, thank you again. Nikola Tesla had some inventions we've all heard about. He proposed inventions and did work on that we haven't heard a lot about. One of the things that he was passionate about is he wanted to use advances in technology to try to eliminate wars and conflicts. And so part of what he did is he developed a proposed defensive weapon system that he called a teleforce. And we're actually seeing part of this coming out in some of the new weapons today that are there. His view of a teleforce, and again, it was a defensive weapon, is he wanted to use uh, pellets or slugs of fabric that were accelerated inside of a vacuum chamber through using things like his Tesla coils to very, very high speed and use that at targets. And he wanted the ability to use it for uh, action on airplanes, on ships, and on ground-based things, uh, which is really kind of interesting because if you look at rail guns and uh, some of the laser weapons and other things like this is something that he had proposed over 100 years ago that we're seeing beginning to be used today. You heard me mention before that one of his inventions was a radio remote control boat that he sailed at Madison Square Garden on some water there. Well, now we're beginning to see that all sorts of places where we have radio controlled torpedoes, where we have all these radio controlled drones and radio controlled drones, not only in the air, but on land, in the water, and others that go back to his pioneering work on his radio remote control systems and how that's being used. We see it. The fact of not only alternating, but he did three-phase electrical current, which is used everywhere today. And you begin to see others. We've heard about his Tesla coil, his Tesla magnifier. He's also created a Tesla valve, and it really was a conduit type of device that would provide resistance and begin to control and modify currents and voltage. Uh, he also was one of the early inventors of the wireless telegraph and the vacuum variable capacitors, which again used a lot and everywhere. And the other one that was interesting is uh, he produced what he called violet rays and began to demonstrate that at some of the world's fairs and began to use many places. He also, with conjunction with the Niagara Falls Commission, when they were beginning to produce hydroelectric power using alternating current, he was in direct competition with what I talked earlier about Tom Edison, and they wanted to develop and show at the World's Fair a house of the future. Thomas Edison was advocating for direct current, uh, where Tesla working with Westinghouse was doing the alternating current, and Tesla and Westinghouse won the contract from the Niagara Falls Commission to do that and began to work there. We heard Jeffrey talk about wireless power. I love today, within 200 miles of me here in Austin, we have 3 different companies who have developed wireless power transmission technology based on the Tesla coil. We have some in Europe, in Israel, uh, in Russia, where they're using that technology to try to ship large amounts of power wirelessly around the world. I know the one that is just north of me here has now transmitted wirelessly power from the United States to South America as part of one of their demonstration projects. It is being quite successful with that. One of the other ones, and this is a technology that I think he stumbled upon because he was trying to work with some of the others, uh, and it was telegenodynamics. So this is technology that is the basis for seismic exploration today that you see in the oil industry and others. And what he did is he was using some of his technologies that he thought was going to be used more for modulating and controlling his current and his wireless power projections. They actually shook the ground and shook the ground in different ways. And I mean, so much that the police in New York were called to him because they thought he was causing an earthquake. But this is the basis for what became seismic exploration today and is used today. And, you know, that ended up being called his earthquake machine because it was all those tied together with his mechanical oscillator that he was producing with it. And it was small. It was only about 7 inches long and weighed a couple of kilos, and you could carry it in your pocket. But it generated resonance in the different buildings, and some of the buildings began to break apart and fall down. And he actually ended up using a sledgehammer to terminate the experiment because the police arrived at his home and was really there. And it was one of those unattended consequences. Nikola Tesla also believed that he put in place the thoughts for producing a time machine. And I tell you, I would like a time machine. I would like the ability to travel back in my past and not make mistakes I made back then, and to undo some of the things I've done, to unsay some of the things I've done. But I guess it would be unfair to travel back in time to do that. But Nikola Tesla in his writings proposed a time machine and the different elements that can be put on around that, Sharif. So I guess let me give it back to Jeffrey for a little bit.
Yeah, cool, for sure. Yeah, I'm also
Yeah,
curious
Mr.
about.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, thanks. I'm also curious about what made Tesla's philosophy on science and understanding nature so much different than what it was the time around him, and like what those things were that allowed him to make all these great discoveries he had. Like, was it yeah, because I know he also worked with mathematics and other kinds of like number vortexes and the 369 frequency, stuff like that. So I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit about that and sort of demystify all that, because there's a lot of just like stuff people say about that without really knowing what it means in terms of mechanics and like physical like engineering. So I'm wondering, because I do work with cymatics and sound waves to create resonance patterns and stuff, but that's just art and it's not as actually mechanics. So wondering what makes Tesla's mechanics so great.
Mark, you want to answer that one?
About Tesla and the mechanics, I think that's probably more up your alley, but more when I think about Tesla, like I mentioned before, a lot of times we need to think about the inventors and their history, and too often we don't know enough about their backstories, and that's something that I wish that we learned more about, with their backstory and how we can bring those messages to the present time. Because like I said, Tesla, it was definitely an innovator, and a very much of a great innovator that came out of that whole European culture and everything, but there are so many innovators that we don't spend enough time learning about. And I wish that our education system would spend as much time as they do on some other things as they uh, need to with some of these historical facts and all in that space. Because I definitely wish that we would, even whether it's George Washington Carver or Tesla, would learn more about their history, their background, and how we can bring that into the modern forefront.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Mr.
Uh,
David Smith. Yeah.
What are we saying, Sharif?
so he he pitched it back to me. I think I agree with Marcus. You begin to see that, and to answer Jeffrey's question is that one of the really neat things about Nikola Tesla is he understood that a technology he made one industry, that he invented one industry, could be used in many different industries. Like the fact that things he made to do with generating alternating current could be used, and he developed motors and all this other stuff around it. The fact that the wireless transmission power could be used many different places. He even made some predictions that we're actually seeing more and more uh, ability to maybe implement today. He talked about a fuel-less passenger flying machine. So this is a, let me just say, airplane uh, that did not use fuel the way we used it today. And his concept behind it was to use the way he wanted to transmit electrical power around the world to other communities. He wanted to use the same technology to transmit that to airplanes flying in the sky, so that they would receive his energy from his Tesla coils and his Tesla magnifiers, and would be received on the engine and go to his oscillators to drive the inductive electric motors he invented, all to do fuelless flight. But if you think about what I've just said, I just listed 6 of his different technologies that he developed for other applications totally. And his mind was such that he says, I can use it in many others. Those of you who listen to me on the program fairly often know I often talk about a system of systems. Well, Tesla wasn't, they didn't call it systems of systems then, but he really was an early proponent of using this type of systems thought to look at systems in multiple different systems and see how his innovations could be brought to bear there. And that might have been one of his challenges, is he was so busy uh, being so innovative and creative across all those that he forgot he needed to commercialize them. Commercialization's hard. Uh, and he was really focused on the invention side, the creation side, um, and did not play well with partners in trying to commercialize it and trying to get it into a product that society could use.
Yeah,
Um,
Sharif, I'm glad you brought that up and everything. And sorry to cut you off, David, and all, but
Go ahead.
definitely, this is actually bringing up what I've been bringing up, which is a lot of times people don't think about these great inventors and how they are oftentimes connected and all in that space. So what you see there, and I'll bring up some of the other ones that are mentioned, but this is an article that was published some 6 years ago, back in 2017, about 5 American inventors that changed the world. And you will see some names that you know, including a name that I just mentioned, because you definitely see Benjamin Franklin, and it says that a few men stood out in American history like Benjamin Franklin, and he had some various inventions, including the bifocal eyeglasses, the lightning rod, the flexible urinary catheter, which we know some people are dealing with if they have prostate issues and things along those lines, the glass harmonica, the long arm reaching tool, the odometer, which a lot of people use as they are getting around, swimming fins, and of course the Franklin stove. And then we have Thomas Edison, and some of his most noteworthy inventions were the light bulb, the phonograph, the motion picture camera, the kinescope, the carbon transmitter, and of course the alkaline storage battery, which is probably lying around many of our houses. As a matter of fact, I had one laying around here not that long ago. There's one right there, and all in that space. And then you've heard me mention George Washington Carver. Well, he was a botanist, chemist, and inventor, African-American one, and he invented 78 different food products, dyes, inks, plastics, laundry soap, laxatives, hand lotion, some form of shaving cream, and the fuel brackets, a form of gasoline, and all in that. So he's also credited with helping to establish the agriculture department at his alma mater, Tuskegee University. And through that department, they developed crop rotation methods and identified alternative cash crops for the local area. And who do we see right after him? Nikola Tesla. So Tesla was another electrical genius. And of course, as Dave was saying, he is familiar today because of the high-end electric vehicles that are named after the Serbian-American inventor. And he was definitely a electrical and mechanical genius, and was a physicist, electrical engineer, and mechanical engineer, and invented a lot of these things that we are talking about. And last but not least is George Eastman. And of course, a lot of photographic enthusiasts will know about Eastman because of the whole connection that he had with Kodak and the Kodak camera, and all in that space. But the question I raised to Sharif and to our listeners and everything is, how much of that is actually taught in the history books in your local high school, or even in your local colleges, and all in that space? So I just gave you a little bit of a quick inventor tutorial on 5 great geniuses, including Tesla and George Washington Carver.
Yeah, I think Tesla was like pretty religious, and I saw this quote the other day where he was talking about how he drew his inspiration from God, and that was what helped him figure out a bunch of stuff. And I think a lot of great inventors do too, because they want to help make the world, find ways to make the world better, and they want to find a way to ask God how they can help make the world, and then they get this wisdom and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's important to talk about when we're talking about Tesla and other inventors too, because
many of them definitely had a spiritual walk, or a faith walk, as some people would call it, because definitely while they were doing great inventions, they were oftentimes inspired from some form of a higher power. Some people will definitely use that term, God, or a spirit entity, or things in that space. But there are also a lot of these inventors that were reflecting back on those that were in front of them as well, because there's oftentimes connections between the inventors and connections between their folks that are in their lineage, that are part of the ancestral lineage as well. Because I think it's very much important that we have that spiritual walk, and also that connection to our past, in the sense of what our ancestors did in their own greatness and everything. Because some of the things that even Tesla was dealing with, I'm sure he was inspired by some of the ancient practices of, say, the Incas, or even some of the ancient practices from some of the inventors that came out of the Middle Eastern area of Egypt and things in that space.
Or like Renaissance. This talk could be called Advances in Leonardo da Vinci Technologies.
Right.
Or whatever. Or any of the Indian stage inventors from like 2000 BC. Yeah, because it's all a continuum, I guess. Because even anyone could be the greatest artist or inventor in the world, but that's all due to the knowledge of everyone before them and stuff.
Hey, David, one of the things that I was curious about, and apparently there was some things that were going on there, and I imagine part of it was that they were also corporate icons as well. And um, I'll say all of them have some degree of recognition even now, and everything, that being Tesla and Edison and even Westinghouse and all in that space. But what were some of these kind of opposition forces they were having? Because in doing some of my research, I did see that while they were um, competitors, they also were always not seeing eye to eye on certain issues. So it does seem like there might have been some adversarial, and not just business adversarial, but adversarial relations between two of the greatest inventors of all time, which is Edison and Tesla. But I don't understand totally what the adversarial relationship was. So can you maybe talk a little bit about that? Because I understand there might have been some adversarial relationship there also.
They had each proposed different standards. The biggest standard was Thomas Edison wanted to use direct current to power the world. And direct current had some advantages in that you didn't have to do the transformations. It had some big disadvantages because the range is short. And for that, if you think about, for example, in our cars are mostly powered by direct current on the electrical side inside of it. But Nikola Tesla, and then his partnership with Westinghouse, they were promoting alternating current. And those two of them do not coexist well when you're trying to use them to light a city, to power a factory, and things like that. So that was part of the basis of that, is that they had competing technologies. And many times when you have competing technologies, you see the companies don't like each other. I mean, you can just look at it in, for example, notebooks and computers. The people who like one brand of computers like Apple don't necessarily like people who are running on PCs or people who are running on Linux, and are the people who do mainframes and others. But they all have their own place, and that was where, to answer your question, is both Edison's approach and Tesla's approach have their own place, but it was that competition between these competing standards that caused that rift you mentioned.
Yeah, and one of the things I was hearing is that he had also eventually licensed patents to Edison's rival, but I didn't realize that he had actually worked for Edison at one point or another. And apparently, in a interview, Tesla recalled that he was in awe of his new boss, because the quote that I was reading said, "This wonderful man who had received no scientific training, yet had accomplished so much, filled me with amazement." So those that are thinking that they have to have that scientific training, I think we're even seeing that in modern day times, where a lot of people that are at the forefront of AI and a lot of these other new technologies are not necessarily those that are college educated. And I'm not knocking, because I actually come from a college background myself, but we are seeing that there are innovators that can be self-taught and can definitely be at the forefront of a lot of these new things. Because I know that even in the AI space, a lot of these folks that are making the moves in that space are like Edison and like a lot of these other folks that we've been talking about. Right. They are more self-taught and are not necessarily college trained, and in some cases did not even complete high school, and all in that space. They had that curiosity mindset that is very important to an inventor.
Yeah, you don't need You don't need a GED when you have GOD.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you. It's a really good discussion, and it's very thought provoking. And we are organizing Nikola Tesla conference, so that's why we are promoting this conference, as well as uh, we want to know more from different perspective. So by this way, we can help more scientists to uplifting this technology and bring more startup for emerging economy. So we need all of your support. This is excellent discussions, and hopefully through this process we can educate a lot of entrepreneurs as well. So thank you, Mr. Jeffrey, thank you, Mr. Markley, and thank you, Mr. David Smith, for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. And you can see that today we train our 100 entrepreneurs in Bangladesh. So we have around 1,500 entrepreneurs right now. So our target, we want to bring 15,000 entrepreneurs. So this is the way that whatever you are delivering, we are take actions, and we are trying to learn from this kind of dialogue. So this is extremely valuable for us. So I request all of our audience, please share our content with the government agency, corporations, and academy. Thank you. Bye bye, and take care.
Okay.
Bye, y'all.
Yeah.